We all set, everyone?
6. Oh,
I'm sorry. Where I am, it's 4 o'clock Mountain Time, but that's okay. Okay, this meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, please conduct a roll call.
You're muted.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Here.
Jamie LeBlanc.
Here.
Hillary Lima,
Here.
Kimberly Shockley,
Here.
Ann Dixon.
Here.
We also have Benjamin Marchant, Nicholas Gorham, Lisa Mills, and Senator Lou Raptakis.
And Kevin McGee.
Okay, Kevin.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. LeBlanc, please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Item C2, reference pages 3 to 15, approval of the Town Council meeting minutes for April 12th, 2021. Madam Clerk, did you receive any corrections?
Yes, I received a correction from Jennifer Ludwig and few corrections from yourself, Ann Dixon.
Correct. May I have a motion to approve the amended minutes?
I'll make a
I'll make a
motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. Second, Mr. LeBlanc. Roll call vote. Please raise your hand if you approve the amended minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Hillary, you were not present at the last meeting, so that you're unable to vote yet. Soon, though. So 4 yeas, no nays. The amended motion is approved. Thank you. Swearing in of District 4 member Hillary Lima. Mrs. Hillary Lima, the town clerk, the town council welcomes you as a member of the council and as a representative from District 4. Senator Raptakis, would you please swear in Mrs. Hillary Lima?
Thank you, Madam President. I guess we can sit. We don't have to stand because you're not going to see. So Hillary Lima, please raise your right hand, if you could. Do you solemnly swear that you will be true and faithful unto the state, support the laws and constitution thereof, and that you will well and truly execute the office of Town Council District 4 member for the term for which you have been elected in and for said town of Coventry, Rhode Island, or until another be engaged in your place or until you are legally discharged therefrom. So help you God.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I am so happy, very happy. Mrs. Lima, we are so happy to have you with us. I know that you will find this a very valuable and fruitful experience, and I know the members who live in District 4 are so happy to have you represent them. Please introduce yourself a little bit to the members of the public and the council, please.
Sure. My name is Hillary Lima. I, of course, live in District 4 over off of 117. I grew up in West Warwick my entire life, graduated from West Warwick Public Schools. I've had a few people ask about me rooting for the Yokers on Thanksgiving. I don't know if we'll push it there yet, but very happy to be a part of the town council. I've always wanted to serve in local government, and while it certainly wasn't on my bingo card to serve or to run to serve in the middle of a pandemic and in the snow, this seemed like a better time more than any, and I've really appreciated those in the community and those in the town and school leadership that have been so willing to speak with me and bring me up to speed and welcome me overall. So really looking forward to working with the team and reaching Coventry's full potential for sure. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. As I said before, we're very happy to have you with us. Next agenda item, announcement of the Economic Development Commission members, Mr. Marchant.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm pleased to announce that I've made appointments of several individuals whom the town council previously interviewed and met with to the Economic Development Committee. We have Mr. Craig Pinardo, Dr. Douglas DeCabellis, Ms. Erin Bosworth, Mr. Jonathan Pasqua, Ms. Jennifer Ludwig, Mr. Tim Pimentel, and Mr. Andy Cohen. We will be meeting on Wednesday, June 23rd, and having our initial kickoff meeting then. And everyone is very excited about this opportunity to discuss the development and future of Coventry.
Thank you, Mr. Marchant. The council is very happy that they were able to recruit, interview, and recommend to you very qualified members from our community. We were very impressed with the passion and the interest that these candidates had when we did interview them, and we were very happy to recommend them to you. Our townspeople have been telling us that they want the town to provide a vision for economic development in our community and to work toward that vision. With this Economic Development Commission, I'm sure that we'll be able to move forward. So thank you so much. The next item is approval of National Grid Verizon pole location request for Town Farm Road, reference pages 16 to 19. Madam Clerk, would you please read the item?
Approval of National Grid / Verizon pole location request at Town Farm Road.
Thank you. Mr. Marchant, any comments?
Not on this one, no.
Okay. Members of the council, may I
If
have a
you have
motion?
questions, Mr. McGee is present if you have any questions.
Okay. Mr. McGee, do you have any comments on this request?
Good evening. No, ma'am. This is a pretty self-explanatory project that National Grid and Verizon are performing to upgrade poles, and this one happens to be for Town Farm.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the request?
Make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Shockley. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Madam Clerk, please do the roll.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Hillary Lima,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley.
Yes. Did we do Ann?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. Okay, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Madam Clerk, please read the next item. Resolution to award a contract to demolish the buildings at 700 Washington Street. This is reference pages 20 to 21.
Resolution affirming the award of contract of the demolition of the 700 Washington Street buildings located at 700 Washington Street to JR Vinagro Corporation at 2208 Plainfield Pike, Johnston, Rhode Island, in the amount of $109,028. This award will be funded through the town contingency fund.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. A second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mrs. Shockley. Any discussion? Mr. McGee, any comments on this contract?
This contract went out to bid. We received 2 contracts of bid awards. One was to another firm for $141,000. JR Vinagro Corporation has taken down several buildings for the town in the past and bid the low bidder each time. We've been very satisfied with their work. They provide a pre-construction plan. Safety is utmost. They've taken down buildings right near the Anthony Fire Station along Washington Street. So they're aware of the traffic issues and the neighbors, and they will be addressing that in the traffic plan. And the police will be located there also.
Thank you. Members of the council, do you have any questions? Ms. Ludwig?
Not a question, more of a comment. So we've talked about this in the past, but at this point, we are now paying almost 3 times the cost to tear down a building that, had we forgiven the sewer assessment fee and looked into some of the local historic societies, could have possibly been saved 10 or 20 years ago. And so this is more of a comment just stating that I am very aware of that when voting on that tonight. I have had some conversations with President Dixon and Manager Marchant about looking at the overall plan and buildings that we have here in Coventry, to have a discussion with the council in the next few months to look at all the properties in town so that we can figure out a better plan, and rather than just going at this piecemeal and tearing down buildings. So it is something that I look forward to discussing in the future once we get past our budget season. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments by members of the council? Mr. LeBlanc.
Just a question on the resolution. It mentions that we will be using the town's contingency fund to pay for this. What's the remaining balance of that contingency fund after this payment would be made? I don't know if that's for Mr. Marchant or Ms. Liz. Ms.
Ms. Mills is looking it up. I don't
Yeah,
have that.
I
number
have
handy.
it right in front of me. Bear with me for a second here. How much was the total? I'm sorry for the takedown.
109,028.
Okay, so there's only 115 in there now, so that's pretty much going to absorb it all. So we'll have
Okay.
6,000 left.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That's all I had, President Dixon.
Thank you. Good information. I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you. Any other comments by members of the council? Ms. Lima.
Thank you. Mr. McGee, can you just clarify? So I think I remember a conversation about this a couple of months ago when this was first introduced. Is this now the town's property? I know that the owners we couldn't get in touch with, I think you were mentioning, and that's why we've gotten to this point. So I was just curious what the future of this would be after it's demolished, if it's now the town's and we could, if it's our land to do with what we want, or what the future is going to be from there.
If you don't mind, ma'am, I'd like to defer to Mr. Gorham. He has been involved with this. We are under a court order to remove it, and he can explain in more detail. But the land, once it's done, if the town has possession of it, it would become a marketable piece of property that the town could sell to pay back the demolition cost.
Sure. With that invitation, unless there's objection, I'll address Councilwoman Lima's question. The town has tax title to the property because no one bid on it at the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 iterations of tax sales. And before that, there were some actually they're partnerships, or they purport to be partnerships. We have a lawsuit pending to detwine the partnership because we think it's actually a person behind all of it. And we are trying to recover the cost of demolition, or at least a contribution to it. So the title is completely messed up, to be honest with you, which is what always happens when something goes for tax sale through and through over and over again. However, if the town is unable to recover money from this individual, in other words, if he doesn't buy it back, then the town is probably going to end up having title to the property.
Okay. Yeah, just my main concern is that's a main throughput through the town and main artery. And I just keep thinking, is that going to be this dirt pile that just sits there as an eyesore as people drive by it? And what's the future going to be? And how long are we going to have to wait before we see something done next with it? But sounds like we're not even clear on what next steps would be for that. So And do we have any detail as far as the logistics and timeline on demolition? Just, I know it's a really heavily trafficked and congested area, especially compounded by the Sandy Bottom Road Bridge construction. So wondering how long or how much of a disturbance that'll be to the local traffic.
Again,
Mr. McGee, would you please respond to that question?
yes, ma'am. We haven't got a plan in place at this point because it has not been awarded.
Okay.
Will be in place. They've told me it's 3 to 4 days to take care of the project. And when it's completed, it will be leveled, it will be loomed and seeded, so it won't be a dirt pile. You'll actually have
Okay,
grass there while it's being marketed.
good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. And I
That's all.
believe that's also in the proposal that was submitted as to how the land would be leveled and how it would be prepared. So I'm very confident, based on what I read in the proposal, that it will not be an eyesore whatsoever, but it will take a little bit of time for it to be, the building to be demolished. Mr. LeBlanc, you have your hand up? Okay.
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay, Mr. Shockley.
Thank you. Mr. LeBlanc's question actually just led me to want to ask, what exactly is the contingency fund for our town? What types of projects other than this is it meant for? And Mr. McGee might have answered this on behalf of this project, that if we sell the land, it would replenish the cost of the demolition. But how do we typically replenish the contingency fund?
So the contingency fund is something you have to budget for.
Okay.
It is your rainy day fund to handle anything that's unexpected that comes up in the year. You might have a heat pump that goes out in a building. You might get a lawsuit that you have to pay a deductible on. You might have a settlement. You might have a building to demolish under court order. Anything that's unexpected that you didn't anticipate is where you turn to. Now, as we talk about the budget later, if we don't have enough budgeted in contingency, then the town has to have a special appropriation from the reserves to fund extraordinary expenses. So the contingency allows you to have it in the budget already, but you can always take it from reserves later if you have to.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. LeBlanc, your hand is still up. I don't want to ignore you, so no questions?
Not sure. I'm not sure where you see my hand. I'm sorry.
It's in the upper right corner of the tile that I'm looking at. Okay, that's fine. All right, any other questions? All right, we have a motion, we have a second, a roll call vote. This is an important vote. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Hillary Lima,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Ann Dixon.
Yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. McGee, for the work you've done in gathering these bids together and presenting all the detailed documentation to us. Okay, next item, the appointment of a moderator for the FY 2021-2022 financial town meeting, which will be held June 8th, 2021. May I have a motion to table the appointment of the moderator, Mr. Inman, as he is not available on June 8th, 2021?
I'll make a motion to table that.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mrs. Lima. I'm sorry, Ms. Ledwick, Mrs. Shockley. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Hillary Lima,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Ann Dixon.
Yes. The motion passes, 5 yeas to no nays. We will take up the issue of appointing a moderator at our next meeting. Thank you.
Ms.
Yes?
As council members or possibly members of the public, how would we nominate someone for that role?
The person, people may nominate to, or suggest someone to individual council members. And on our next meeting on May 24th, then we will have an executive session. All nominations will be presented to the entire council. The council will make a decision concerning an appointment, and the appointment will be made in the public session, which will immediately follow our executive session.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just as a reminder, because the hearings that we are having on the 24th were advertised for 6 p.m., and we do have important business to conduct for executive session, the executive session will be held after the public meeting on the 24th. So we'll start the public meeting at 6. When that is concluded with our business, we will go into executive session, discuss whatever needs to be done in that session, including the appointment of a moderator. We will then return to public session and vote on the appointment. Okay? Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please read item D3?
A resolution adopting the Town of Coventry operating and capital budget of $112,664,689 for fiscal year 2021-2022 for a presentation at the financial town meeting on June 8th, 2021, and an all-day referendum on June 10th, 2021, as per Town Charter, Section 8.18, little a.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion and then a second, and then I'll ask Mr. Marchant to present his recommendations to us, and then we will open it for discussion. So may I have a motion on this resolution as it appears in D3?
I'll make a motion as it appears in D3.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Marchant, would you please make your recommendations to the council?
Certainly. I'm going to share my screen once the host allows me to. There we go. And I will share these slides, which by now have become somewhat familiar to everyone. So again, I think this is a very momentous occasion for the town of Coventry, because what you're doing is you're making a decision about what the priorities are for the town's services and operations for the next year. And today's decisions will determine tomorrow's opportunities. As I've presented in the past, we started with a budget proposal of 3.95% levy increase. And as we've worked through numerous changes at the direction of the council, we came up with a funding proposal to lower the levy increase to 2.99% in order to maintain all the services that we could at the barest of margins. And so we were able to reduce the overall expenditures between the municipal and the schools operations by $758,525 from the proposed budget. And so the new total expenditures would be $111,763,164. This next slide shows how we got to that number. There were many moving parts that Director Mills and I worked together on, as some budgets, some line items were found. We had overlooked things that we needed to add back in, like the $200,000 sewer bond payment and the $53,000 lease payment to Johnston Pond. Those were overlooked in previous iterations, but we did find that there were other savings to be had, and ultimately we got there by eliminating $500,000 from the CIP budget, and we're now budgeting $0 for capital improvement projects and new road projects. And the school's appropriation was reduced by $329,000 550. Some of the cuts were easier to make as we found that some of our cost increases were less than expected for insurance. The library had lesser needs for some of the part-time that was budgeted and for repairs. We do have funds in the impact fee fund to cover some of these repairs in the future. So we felt very comfortable and responsible with making these reductions. Here's a slide. Again, all these slides have been posted on the town website under the budget and finance section. This would be the first one in that section. And people can see what these different levy increases would have an impact on their property. Just to give an idea of what a 2.99% levy increase would be compared to a 3.95%. We did the projections with this new levy rate because I thought it would be important to see what is the impact on the budget in future years, because you want to make sure that you're not budgeting into a deficit for the town in the future. And so we used the same assumptions that we presented in the previous public hearings and the previous budget work session, where we're just straight line projecting a property tax increase of 3% a year for each year. And property tax only represents 69% of the revenue base. We do get revenues from other sources. So it's not the totality of our revenue, but it is the important part. And other revenues increased at a rate of 2% each year. We straight lined the expense increases for the Coventry Public Schools at 3.3% each year, and the town municipal appropriation an increase of 3%. So the good news is that with both projections using the 3.95% levy increase that was originally budgeted for and the 2.99%, we were able to achieve a stable fiscal projection. So with a 3.95%, you can see that the surpluses are very healthy, somewhat less than what would be required to fund an $89 million school bond, but it would set up the town to be able to afford to do lots of projects and maintain infrastructure into the future. With a 2.99% levy, you can see right off it reduces those surpluses in half, but it still keeps us in the black and only begins to tail off at the end of 10 years. So one thing that I want to have everyone bear in mind is that when we're looking at the 2022 budget, while it is balanced, this is just one point in time for the town of Coventry, and that there are a lot of considerations and factors outside of this one budget year that we need to be aware of. We have a minimum required maintenance for the schools that they need to spend 2.5% of their budget on maintenance, and that impacts the town's reimbursement of state housing aid. If the schools don't spend it, then the town doesn't get the reimbursement, and that has a direct impact on our revenues and our ability to maintain a balanced budget throughout the year. We also have unfunded pension obligations, and our annual required contributions also have an impact on our ability to balance a budget. We have aging infrastructure. The longer we put off projects, the more it will cost to repair them. And of course, if we want to have any new facilities, those will need to be planned and budgeted for in the future, again, increasing the costs of our governmental operation. We do have other resources on the positive side that we haven't received yet, but we do anticipate that could really help with our programs. The federal COVID and stimulus funds, the guidelines are out, but we haven't received the money, and until we get it in the bank, we're not making any plans to spend it until we know what we have. But that does give us some flexibility to spend on different infrastructure projects, and anything that the town had to cut in the last year or that got short shrift because of the effort spent on managing the COVID pandemic, we can use those stimulus funds to rebuild our budget and do things like that. We can always look at new fees, new programs, but we have to anticipate there will be changes from time to time in state and federal aid, not always in the positive, but all these dynamics we have to understand go beyond just a one-year budget proposal. And this is my final slide where I've lined out what the balanced budgets look like for the various levy increases that I've talked about in the last month. We started with a 3.95% levy increase, and that met the school's request for a 4% increase in their appropriation, and we were able to achieve a balanced budget. And then as we've gone back and looked at lower levy rates, we have a 3.5% that appropriates a 3.5% increase to the schools. And then the 2.99% levy increase would appropriate an increase of 3.3% to the schools. The numbers in green are what the actual increase that both the schools and the municipal side of the town would experience year over year. And it's a higher rate than what the appropriation or the levies are, because it includes state and federal funds and other non-levy producing revenues. So that is my presentation. Are there any questions you have for me? And I'll leave it to you for discussion.
Okay, it's open for discussion now. Council members. Questions from council members?
President Dixon, I have a question.
Certainly.
Mr. Marchant, you've proposed, well, what I see on the slide is a 299, a 3.5, and a 3.95. What is your recommendation to the council that we go with?
Well, my recommendation is the 2.99%, based on the input I've received from the public, from the council, and given the conditions that we're in coming out of the COVID pandemic, there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And I think that's a responsible budget that meets the needs and will give the town time to work through, especially me as the new manager, to work through the operational dynamics of the organization to see if we can find other opportunities to save or to increase revenues or tap other revenue sources. So all of that is going to take me a lot more than the 6 weeks I've had to just see what we can do. So this is the recommendation I have that I think best meets the needs. It would be nice to get a higher levy rate increase only to set the town up for funding other future obligations that I've already referenced in my presentation. But I think it comes down to a policy decision of the town council as to what the priorities are and how you're going to meet them from a policy standpoint. I've heard a lot about the budgets that were proposed and voted on in the referendums last year, and how because one group thought the appropriation wasn't enough, they came out and voted it down. Another group thought the appropriations were too much, so they voted that down. And that there wasn't a consistent justification or message about how to fund the government of Coventry for the 2020-2021 budget year. And I am confident that any of these three budgets will meet the needs and be just fine for the community. But it depends on the decisions that you make today, how you're going to set the town up for affording other things in the future. Certainly, a bond issuance, if there's support for that in the community, you'll need to increase your revenue base in order to make the debt service payments. But if that's not a priority, or if that's not seen as a likely alternative, then you're going to make different decisions.
Appreciate the insight there. One additional follow-up question. I know with the 2.99 to get there, one thing we reduced was the CIP budget from 500 to 0. I know we haven't really talked about COVID funds, dollar amounts or anything like that. You did mention that you had received some information on what we will be able to use those funds for. I know that the COVID funds will cover the 500, so you don't see any issue whatsoever with us taking down the 500 for now. Once we receive the COVID funds, we'll be able to use that money specifically for what we were going to use it for anyways, correct?
Correct. That is my belief.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank
President Dixon.
you. You're welcome. Mrs. Shockley, questions?
Thank you. And I appreciate that question from Mr. LeBlanc, because I was wondering the same thing about the COVID money. Are we positive that we'll be able to spend it on the different items that we'd spoken about previously? Putting some towards our roads, for instance, and really being able to start not just staying plateaued, but growing and making this town look a little bit more like where we all would like to live.
So can I add to that, to Mr. Marchant's answer? We did get some briefing on it. The total regulations will be tomorrow. There are some infrastructure categories that qualify, but I'm pretty confident, coupled with the COVID plus the impact fees, which are fairly substantial that haven't been spent, will satisfy minimum 500,000.
Okay. That's fantastic. As far as, and I apologize, I think it might have been slide 3. Could we possibly go back there?
Yeah.
So the 21,399 for the contingency fund, we just voted to spend 109,000, basically depleting that fund. Are we comfortable with that as what we're appropriating this year? I don't know what the fund should really hold.
We did build a little bit of contingency back into the budget as we were having things fluctuate up and down. Where are we at now?
Is that a question for Lisa?
Yeah.
Did you want me to answer that?
Yeah. Do you just
So,
where are we at with contingency? Because we were at
So-
30,000 at one point, and
yeah, unfortunately, we've been going back and forth with these slides, and I believe that one on the 2.9, it's 21,399. It should be 71,900. That didn't get updated, so the contingency for this 2.9 is 71,900. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Keeps all the numbers the same. That was just an error in, you put what you were reducing it by instead of.
Right, so
what
that
you're
was a last
reducing it
minute change. The
Okay.
library stated that they didn't need all their part-time, and it looks like appears I forgot to change that slide. But the difference of -28, it's only a -28 decrease, so 28.
Gotcha.
So
That makes a lot
that's-
more sense. Okay.
Yeah, that's my fault. We get so many changes. It's going back and forth. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so we're keeping 70,000 for our contingency fund. So the fact that we have used quite a bit of that just in tonight's meeting to take a current safety issue and demolish that building and hopefully be able to use it for better purposes. The library is fine. They've already said, as far as part-time, we don't need what we thought we needed. And there's a decrease on what they thought they needed for repairs.
Correct.
Perfect. How about, I know Parks and Rec have been cut pretty hard in the past. So how does this budget work for them? Because I know they're already saying they're keeping our fields at like base minimums. So I know Coventry has a lot of AAU and competitive teams that we might get to rent this space if we maintained it well. So that's just something that I'd like to ask about.
So you want me to expand on what we cut, or do you would like to expand on that, Ben?
Well, I think we can both take a turn, but I would just say that this is still putting money back into the parks budget more than the current year. It's less than what they would have gotten under the 395 because we had to make reductions somewhere. So it's up, but it's not as much as they had in prior years. I think 3 years ago they were funded at 1.1 million, and 990,000 is pretty far off of that. But it's giving them a little bit more. It's cutting back on some of what they had funded for porta potties and the field maintenance. And that's just where we had to cut because we're pretty lean here, and we don't have the luxury of any more funds with the 2.99% levy increase.
Okay.
And I can just add on that. I mean, it was mainly what we cut was they had a substantial capital outlay and recreation equipment, which can be funded by the impact fees because she has enough to cover that.
Okay. So there's a place in their budget where it's now being paid for by impact fees instead of from.
As long as we don't budget for the special revenue funds, but there are funds available for her to utilize to improve those fields for sure.
Gotcha.
A substantial amount, well and above what she had budgeted for in this budget.
Fantastic. You've made me feel a lot more comfortable about the COVID just because I was reading through some of the recommendations and it just concerned me, like, can we spend on something so that we then open up the rest of our budget to be able to spend it as we need to and as we see fit. And although we don't know what we're getting for COVID funds yet, and haven't discussed as a council yet how we'd like to spend that money, this does seem like just a piece of, a significant amount of money that we're getting from the federal government. And also it sounds like you've had discussions with every department before making these changes to the budget. What was the feedback from the school?
We met with the school last Thursday, and they don't like seeing their budget appropriation go down. We can be honest about that. They feel like they have a very tight budget situation, but they've been very positive that they want to work in partnership, that we're going to be unified in our approach to provide these services and provide a budget that hopefully the public will be willing to pass and support.
And with this budget, are we comfortable that the minimum required maintenance, because I think I've explained this to myself 72 times since we started talking about it earlier in this budget season, but still, so from the school's budget, they now have to have 2.5% of that spent on capital improvements.
On building maintenance specifically.
So it's not extra money coming from the town. It's not the school has an extra 2.5%. It's from the money they're already spending. They now have to spend 2.5% on building improvements.
Yes, that's the law, and that's what the state mandates.
Okay, so it's yet another mandate that is growing every year without more money coming in.
Can I
Yes,
add to
Lisa,
that?
Go ahead, Ms. Mills.
This is not a new requirement. This is a standard state law, and the reason why they have this state law is so schools don't let their buildings crumble.
Yep.
And then later the state has to come in and substantially reimburse the schools for, with a bond like 50%, 42%, whatever it is. We are the only municipality that, as far as I know, that is having a tough time making those maintenance requirements. I think just from my perspective, the town appropriates $48 million. Within that, the 2% has to come out of there. And that's the way I see it. So.
Yep, 2% last year, 2.5% next year. And then is 3 the cap?
Yeah, it'll get up to 3%.
Okay. And can we just go, So I guess I'm wondering with surplus, you've mentioned projects and infrastructure. We're seeing surpluses but they're decreasing at the end of each year in your 10-year projection, which I truly appreciate, by the way. I've never seen something projected out before in these budgets. So it's just really great to see. So just going back in time a little bit, our appropriations were kind of like this. We had over about 1.67 in 2019, then to 4, then in a negative as far as the percent change overall, and then 1.5. So I guess as we look forward, after 10 years, what happens? Like, what do we do? How do we make changes?
So I looked at the information and the trends going back 20 years, and it's very interesting. The average levy rate increase over 20 years is 0%, like 0.12, because there were some years where it was zero funded and some years, one year where it actually went down. And so on the whole, the average was 0. I know in recent years, there have been some higher levy rates. And so when you take it in the totality of, oh, wow, 20 years, that's really going to have an impact. And you can see it in the services and the conditions of the roads and the conditions of the fields and the resources that the town enjoyed in prior years. We don't have that cushion now. And so looking into the future, you always have to kind of rebalance and kind of put off the specter of inflation and rising costs against your available revenues. And even with this 10-year projection, it's assuming a 3% levy rate every year.
Right.
And
that it gets approved.
If that's realistic, then you know how realistic the numbers are. If that's not realistic, that can't possibly really be supported 3 years in a row, then you're going to see those surpluses further reduced. And the closer you get to a balanced budget or a zero or a deficit in the outer years, the more critical it will be to make cuts or find other revenues from year to year.
Okay, and then my final question, and I really appreciate my fellow council members letting me ask more than one. As far as the bond goes, right now the state has a lot of money on the table. And I would like to at least be able to put it to the voters. Under this projection, it doesn't sound like that's something we'd even be comfortable putting to the voters.
So I would defer to maybe other expertise. I talked with a solicitor, and it really came down to if the voters were to approve a bond, the state's not going to let you default on the bond. And so I just don't know if the bond will have its own levy attached to it to pay for the bond above and beyond and separate from the budget, so that it's not part of the annual vote every year. Then it would be completely feasible and separate. But either way, a bond is a bond, and it has to be paid for. So it does represent a substantial tax increase in order to cover that cost.
Thank you very much. This presentation was really informational. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Shockley. Question for Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you, President Dixon. So, Mr. Marchant, what other things have we discussed originally? For example, with the originally proposed budget versus this lesser option? What other things do we lose? So, for example, should we expect any interruptions in DPW services? are there any things that people are going to lose by doing the 299, or is that that's the basic minimum to keep everything we have?
Ms. Ludwig, I have a question. Are you comparing 299 with 395? Is that the
Yes.
question? Okay.
Yes. So the original, if you could go to the last slide, Mr. Marchant. So if you go to the last slide, there's 3 options. I'm just
Slide
going to
number
call
9.
them
Yes,
yellow, brown, and orange.
right.
So with orange, we went line by line through every item with every department head here over the last few months, to see what are the items that they thought they should be budgeting for. We didn't actually talk about whether we lose current services or if that's the basic to maintain everything we have today at option yellow. Is that the understanding, to maintain what we have today?
Yes.
Okay.
Going from 395 to 299, the biggest decrease is in the school's allocation, and they're 330,000. And the town's able to backfill the capital that was cut with these other funding sources. But in the individual departments, yeah, there were things that we cut that they would have liked to have kept in their budget, for sure. But I don't think it's going to translate into a visible notice or noticeable reduction of services. I think it's really hard to tell when your services go down if you're cutting grass 1 in 8 days instead of 1 in 5. Maybe the grass gets longer in the parks for a little while, but how much do you notice before it gets cut again? I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but when you don't expend what you need to in order to maintain the quality of the roads and the infrastructure, it wears out faster and it becomes more expensive down the road. And I think with the 299, we're skirting the edge of that risk. And we do need to come up with a better plan in the future, which I've talked about doing with the strategic planning effort and kind of laying out a 5-year plan about how we're going to get ahead of that deterioration curve.
Okay. With coming out of COVID, I'm saying we're coming out of COVID. I don't know if that's true or not.
We all hope.
We all hope we're coming out of COVID. Last year, we had 3 budget votes, and 2 of those budget votes ended up with the feedback from our taxpayers saying we need to tighten our belts. And so I think last year, the cuts that were made, quite frankly, they didn't seem to be felt across the town, I don't believe, because of COVID. So for example, we couldn't have some of the Parks and Rec services because we weren't even allowed to have the sports teams and the outdoor events and things like that. And so one thing I'm thinking about, for people that have given me feedback in my district about why do we need a tax increase, we did not successfully operate at level funded last year. There were dramatic cuts made that people probably did not see and feel because COVID. We made those choices in the areas where COVID was affecting us, so we couldn't do them anyways. And so I am in favor of looking at something that at least meets the bare minimum with this option in yellow. I would like to talk just a little bit more about capital improvement plan, because I know that your suggestion in yellow has basically 0, where we would be completely counting on the COVID money for any type of improvement. And I just want to pose this question out there for the counselors and I to think about. In a responsible budget, do we 100% count on the COVID money at some point that we will use just that for these expenditures? Because, I've seen multiple debates on trestle bridges and where the money might go, the maintenance on the bike path. And those are all things that, those are tangible things that people would possibly see a difference in, but with zero in our CIP, that means we would 100% have to rely on COVID funds for any type of visible change. It looks like Lisa has a comment.
Can I add to that? Because
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's zero. We have presented it as zero increase in CIP, but so just so you understand, like the roads and bridges, we have the amount in our budget for the capital lease, which is going to take care of 7 different types of equipment that Mr. McGee is purchasing. And so that's included in this year's budget. So that's capital. And also we've included, we are looking at this fleet lease program, which is going to rotate our vehicles, the really extremely old. And that is going to be offset with all the large maintenance that we have right now. So to say we're not going to, there's no CIP in there at face value, looking at it, there is no CIP, but because we are going to be, we have a capital lease payment in the roads and bridges, that's accounting for some of it. And then above we have at least, I can't guess, but I calculated roughly 135,000 in maintenance that is going to be reduced substantially when we get in this lease program. And that will go down dramatically and way below the cost of the lease payments. So that's so it's not like we're going bare here. So, and then there are substantial impact fees for departments other than DPW, because DPW is looking to use their impact fees now for 5 different roads to pave. They're a little bit short. They're about 40,000 short right now, but they're looking for that. So it's not, we do have impact fees to fund the CIP in addition to potential COVID stuff, COVID funds. So it's not, it sounds dramatic, like, because it's not on the one line item, but we, like I said, we have the lease payments. And then then when we add, I know Ben's going to do a presentation with a third party about the fleet enterprise, about rotating vehicles and bringing new ones in. It's going to pay for itself and reduce substantial amount of this maintenance.
So if I can summarize, it sounds like what you're saying is we have other options, impact fees, and then at some point COVID funds. So we think that the CIP for this year, because of the COVID funds, is okay to leave out.
Yes, I agree.
That's what she's saying.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Ludwig, do you have any other questions right now?
I'm going to think for a moment.
Okay, Mrs. Lima, excuse me. Questions?
More just a comment. I just wanted to point out to the council and to others on the call that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one of these levies we choose to support that's in front of us. What matters is what we do next. And that's beyond communicating about getting out to vote for the budget, no matter what your opinion is. It's about communicating the value that you do receive from what you pay currently. I don't think that our tax base is aware enough of what is available to them as far as services, as the quality of the service that they're receiving comparative to other municipalities in the state. And just in the week and a half that since I've been elected, I've learned so much about this town that I can guarantee that so many don't know. And some of the really good things that do happen in town. So while we keep talking about that, we keep using the term of bare minimum or baseline to operate. I think we need to, as a group, really look hard beyond this budget at how we plan to develop communication strategies and communicate in frankly a 21st century way with our tax base about what value they're getting. We would never hand over money to a vendor or a tradesperson to do work on our house and then be okay with not knowing what exactly they did with that money. I think it's important that we prioritize how often and what means, and how high we prioritize communicating with this tax base. Otherwise, we'll continue to be in this vicious cycle that we're in now. So I just ask that the community and those especially here on the call and leadership really think about how we can't just stop here, and we can't just reach out to voters at budget time. We have to communicate better moving forward. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lima. Ms. Ludwig? Any additional comments?
No, I lowered my hand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just mention that the following, many of the questions that have been brought up this evening, they're excellent questions. I hope we have enough people who are listening in on this call, who understand what we're trying to do as a council. Many of these questions I've asked, many of the council people have asked at the introduction of the budget and through the 2 public hearings that we have had in this evening. These are my comments. 399 represents the original, or 395 represents the original ask. 3.5 represents a very reasonable budget after a fiscal year of 3 failed referendum. It maintains the services and benefits on both the town and school side that the voters are used to. But what the voters are also used to are road conditions that are not up to par, potholes that occasionally do not get fixed, road conditions that are deteriorating on us, and other services. So 355 represents what you're used to, and that includes all the good, but it also includes the things that are really causing some angst among the voters. 299 represents what I believe is a lean, responsible budget, which will require post-referendum very difficult decisions on how to reduce expenditures and increase revenue. And 299 also projects a deficit of $77,900. 299 represents a modest increase for both the town and the school. A failure at the referendum this year puts us back 2 years, with the town and school operating on 1/12 of a budget month to month. Once the appropriation with a 2.99 tax levy passes, then as Ms. Lima and the others have mentioned, the townspeople need to step up and let us council people know exactly what is their vision for the town and for the school, and what services and benefits are most important to them. That will drive the decision-making that the council will be forced to make to look at how do we increase revenues and how do we reduce expenditures. So those are my comments. It's a very overall high-level view, because most of the questions we've had tonight and other hearings have been already answered. Any other questions from members of the council? Okay. Mr. LeBlanc.
I actually I want to make an amendment to the motion that was made to reduce the operating and capital budget to $111,763,164, which represents a 2.99% increase. Effectively, what that does is, since this current year that we're in was level funded, that is less than 1.5% increase for this current year and for next year, if this budget was to get approved. So I just want to make that amendment.
Okay, and just as an additional on page 9, that represents a local appropriation increase of 3.30% for the schools, which adding in state revenues, it would represent a 4.03% increase for the school. Okay, we have an amendment on the floor to change the appropriation to $111,763,164. Do I have a motion?
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Gora, question. We can't hear you, Mr. Gora. We cannot hear you.
President
was going to
Dixon, I
say
think that,
you were looking for a second, but member Ludwig made a second before
Okay,
it's to mention that. So
I'm
Okay.
trying to.
I'm going to stay.
I'm trying my best. I don't know if there's a delay or what, but I'll second the motion to
Thank
amend down
you.
to 111, 763, 164.
any
And Your Honor,
discussion?
since my motion is now moot, or my point is moot, I'm going to turn on the mute. So
Thank you. Any discussion on this amendment? All right. Mr.
President
LeBlanc,
Dixon,
I
President
think
Dixon,
Hillary-
do I see a hand?
yes.
Which hand do I see?
Councilmember Lima.
The shiny new one.
Yes, Mrs. Lima.
Could you just clarify the point that you made in your remarks that if a 2.99 is approved, we should be seeing a 77, you said an amount that we'll be seeing as a deficit. Can you just clarify that point? Because I haven't seen that we would be planning for a deficit in any of the slides here, so.
Sorry, there won't actually be a deficit. That was in a slide that had an error in the calculation that Councilor Ludwig pointed out, and Lisa and I were able to go back and find that error. It does balance, and it is a balanced budget with no
Okay.
deficit.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
I thought that correction had been made to change that. Okay, excellent. Good news. Very good news. Thank you for the clarification. Mrs. Shockley, we're discussing the amendment.
Yes, so just for procedure, I need to know if someone wanted to put forward an alternative amendment, at what point does that happen and how do we move forward?
We have to vote on one amendment at a time. So we will have a vote on the amendment that Mr. LeBlanc has put forward. If that fails, then we can entertain another amendment.
Point of information, I believe the deepest that you can go in Robert's rules is an amendment to the amendment. So I believe Mrs. Shockley could make another one, but of course it's up to you, Madam Chair. But I do believe that the inception, if you will, of amendments on amendments goes only 2 layers deep. So she could technically, I believe, by Robert's rules, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Mr. Gorman, would you please rule on that?
yes, Robert's rules do not control the town council. It's really up to the chair and the council as a whole, whether to allow an amendment of an amendment. I can say that but just to be clear, Robert's rules does not govern the passage of motions or the consideration of motions.
Understood. Just wanted to give some information about things.
Thank you.
Mrs. Shockley, I do believe that all members of the council have a right to speak. Do you wish to offer an amendment to the amendment?
Yes, so in doing some small math, which I hope is correct, I found that $48 million, which is what we appropriate to the schools, 2% of that is $960,000. But as it gets raised to 2.5%, that's $1.2 million. So a difference of $240,000. So as opposed to cutting the school's budget by $329,000, I would like to decrease that amount to $90,000 so that we are accounting for the additional minimum required maintenance that has to be paid for this year. I also am not comfortable. I know we have cut the Parks and Recs budget quite a bit in the past, and I don't feel that that is the best place to make cuts to our budget. So I would like to, from the 3.95% levy that was put forward originally, I would like to make the cuts to the capital improvements, which can be paid for with COVID, $50,501 to the library, $28,513 to the contingency fund, and 89,000 to the schools, which would decrease the proposed budget by $668,014, as opposed to $758,520.
Okay, Mrs. Shockley, number one, we cannot tell the schools what to do. So even if you
No,
were,
I know that we can't tell them how to spend it,
I
but just
didn't
doing the
finish-
math
I
on what we know is going into the budget, what is getting raised in the budget. That's how I did my math, and I just wanted to make that clear.
okay, so in order to make an amendment to the amendment, you have to give me a total dollar figure. So the amendment right now is 111,763,164. You have to give me a total increase in the appropriation that you would like to add, and that then becomes the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, so I would like to take the 111,763,164 put forth by Councilmember LeBlanc. And I believe, I hope my numbers are right. Actually, before I make my amendment, can someone tell me, because I believe this number here at the bottom of the 3.95% levy is different than what you said, because it was 112,664, 689, right? That's what the reduction is there. I would like to add back in to the 111,763, 164, an additional $240,000 to the schools. And I believe it was 80,000 and $80,830 to the Parks and Rec Department. So I would like to propose $112,083,994.
So the increase is $112,839. Is that correct? I'm not sure that is correct.
Hold
with
on.
all the things you mentioned.
It is $320,830 for the increase. And that would bring us to $112,083,994. I apologize. I used to be able to say numbers.
I didn't get the last three figures, Mrs. Shockley.
$112,083,994.
Okay. Mrs. Shockley has proposed the amendment be changed to the appropriation of $112,083,994. You're making that motion, Mrs. Shockley, correct?
I am, I believe, but I see Attorney Gorham's hand up. So maybe I
Mr.
don't know.
Gorham?
Yes. Madam President, when the council first met as a council, it adopted a certain set of rules. One of them was Rule 7.5, which I will read. It pertains to the amendments to motions. No proposal of a.
Oh, we can't increase.
No, that's not the problem. Actually, it's that the way I read it, I'll read it out loud and we can all draw our own conclusions, but I think it means that you cannot amend an amendment. Rule 7.5 is entitled Amendments to Motions. No proposal of a different subject from the one under consideration may be admitted as a motion or amendment to a motion. A motion to amend shall be in order, but one to amend an amendment shall be out of order. So the way I read that is that you cannot amend an amendment, which is
Okay,
a common practice among legislative bodies, by the way. General rule is one
Which makes sense
amendment.
because it's confusing.
Right. Well, be that as it may, the general rule is that amendments cannot be amended. So the council did adopt those rules. You are the council. I am simply pointing that out.
okay, thank you very much. So we're back to the amendment which Mr. LeBlanc has made, which is to change the appropriation to $111,763,164. We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion on that amendment? We're now going to vote on the amendment.
Yes,
Ms.
I-
Ludwig,
yes, I have comment. So I think based off of the talk that we had earlier, that we have other avenues of capital improvement, even if it's not allocated to the specific fund. I am much more comfortable now with that reasoning. I've also heard us use the term surplus, and I think that's a tough word for even me to understand, let alone our taxpayers, because surplus seems to indicate that we are frivolous, or there's extra money out there. And to me, we are still not all the way out of COVID. So putting forward a responsible budget, something that will maintain services and give us time to work towards the future, to me is the highest priority. And so I am in favor of the current amendment. Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions on discussion on the amendment? Okay, I'm in favor of the amendment. It does represent a very lean, responsible budget, and it will require, as I mentioned before, very difficult decisions post-referendum on how we're going to reduce expenditures and increase revenues. And Mr. Marchant, through his comments, have assured us that there are various avenues and options that we can consider, and we're going to need to do this. So the day after the referendum, we're going to have to basically start convening and start thinking about what we do next. And that's a promise really to the voters who have told us that they want to keep the tax increase very, very low, if nothing. But I think people realize that without a tax increase, they are going to have a severe reduction in the services that they do have. Okay, are we ready for a vote on the amendment? Okay, Madam Clerk, I would like you to do a roll call vote on the amendment.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Hillary Lima,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Ann Dixon.
Yes, 5 yeas, no nays, the amendment passes. All right, we're now going to vote on the amended resolution. So the resolution is now going to read, if you're following along, in agenda item D3. The resolution adopting the town of Coventry operating and capital budget of $111,763,164 for fiscal year 2021-2022 for presentation at the financial town meeting on June 8th, 2021, and an all-day referendum on June 10th, 2021, as per Town Charter Section 818A. Madam Clerk, please conduct the roll call vote, please.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Hillary Lima,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Ann Dixon.
Yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The amended motion passes. Thank you very much, council members. We're now open to public comment. Thank you, Mr. Gorin, for reminding us of our own rules.
Welcome.
Thank you. Public comment. Do we have anyone who, we have a number of participants online with us.
There's one request at a time.
Thank you.
I'll bring them in now.
Thank you.
Mr. Aswell, you're in the meeting. Did you have a comment?
Mr.
Yeah, I have a
Asselon,
question.
excuse me, Mr. Asselon, please state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is John R. Asselone, 6 Veronica Court, Coventry, Rhode Island.
Mr. Asselon, thank you for joining us. Your comment, please.
I think it's been a very good meeting, Mike. I have some questions. It's my understanding that Coventry is going to receive initially over $10 million in COVID funds. For some reason, nobody wants to admit that. And it seems to be that the manager and others are waiting to after the vote of the financial town meeting. And yet memos are going out that we're going to receive over $10 million. And I think that is totally disingenuous of those behind this. So is it a sucker play? Sorry to use that word. Let's play poor mouth continually. And look, I'm for an increase in the budget, but I'm for also transparency. So are we on line for starters and more to come, at least a $10 million funding from COVID? First question.
Why don't we take the first question? Mr. Marchant, would you please respond to Mr. Asselon's question?
So, yeah, we acknowledge that there is going to be an amount of COVID funding coming, and a portion of that is going to go directly to the Coventry Public Schools. A portion will go directly to the town, and we anticipate the town's share will be between $5 and $6 million. And as it is one-time funding, we do not want to use those funds to build our operating budget, because we will just put ourselves in a terrible position the following year to not have the funds necessary to maintain operations. So we are planning to use it for capital improvements to catch up on the $6 million capital improvements plan for 2021-22. And that is the best use of those funds, which will in turn increase the quality of the roads so that people's car maintenance hopefully.
Okay, I get it, Mr. Manager,
Yep.
I get it, but my question still is, why is the figure not over 5 or 6 million? Is the figure not over $10 million? And why are you holding that back?
Well, we haven't received anything, so we aren't holding
Yeah,
anything
when you
back.
haven't received any notice, you're gonna get $10 million? Have you received
Well,
that? Come on,
At this point, it's a promise. It's not a money in the bank.
but if you received a notice, you're gonna receive over $10 million. Simple question.
No, we haven't. I'll answer that
You
question.
haven't?
We have,
Wait a minute, the
We
manager's
have
sending out memos.
estimates.
The manager is sending out memos
Yeah.
that $10 million is coming. Now, come on.
I have not
Well-
sent out any such memo.
so, so Mr. Asselon, if you can, give me a chance to respond here. We have schedules that are coming out from the US Treasury with projected amounts. And we also have, the actual regulations that are going to get defined a little bit further tomorrow. And, you know, some of them are for infrastructure categories, lost revenue. They're not to be used for pensions. They're not supposed to use for financial reserves or outstanding debt. There's a lot of restrictions on it. So yes, we do know what's coming. I know the school has received some money already. We haven't received part of the Biden COVID money.
Well, I'm not going to embarrass several people, but I have a copy of the memo that the manager sent out stating over the $10 million. I have a copy of that under your
Yeah.
signature. And I think it's terrible that you're addressing this, that you've not sent it out. And I will not embarrass.
I
it
apologize,
is.
sir. I do recall now that I had sent a
Oh.
memo to the town council
Right.
talking about some numbers, but
And the numbers were over
it
$10
was not
million.
definitive or final, and that was work product that I did not make public. It was literally just a working kind of ideas that we discuss in terms of planning.
And when was it going to be made public? After the financial town meeting?
Well, it's going to be made, I mean, here's the bottom line issue. And I'm not sure everyone totally understands the funding of, when the US Treasury sends you funds, they're specified for a certain, they also are going to send out in detail with the US Department of Treasury, the regulations. So in the worst case scenario, if let's say only 50%, we can only use 50% of the funds because we cannot use them for this certain different sources, just because it's allocated X amount, if we don't meet the exact regulations for those sources, they're not gonna, we will not be able to retain them. I mean, you cannot, there's specified reasons of what you can use them for. And if we don't fall into those categories, that doesn't mean that we're going to get the full amount that has been allocated to the town of Coventry. The school
Lisa, let me-
department has different, they have different regulations for the Ursa 1 and 2, et cetera, and they have the same set of specified regulations. So I'm just to put that out there, it's not a blanket, oh, you're going to get $10 million and that's it. No, you have to follow the regulations. And if we don't have funds that account for those categories, it's.
Let me just wrap it up with two more questions or a statement. Number one, there is no way under God's green acres that you're going to get $10 million and not find a way to spend it. That's absolutely ridiculous. My other question is, I called you this morning and you were quite aggravated when I asked you cash balances the town has.
I wasn't aggravated. I had the town clerk.
You hollered at me, why? And I said, frankly, it's none of your business. I'm the taxpayer. I'm gonna say this isn't Coventry. And you
First of all,
told me, excuse me, and you told me that, and I know it's simple enough for you to hit a couple of numbers in your computer, but you told me I have to go to a request for public information. So you cannot tell Coventry before the financial town meeting how much you're having cash balances? What's the problem?
So first of all, Mr. Assalone, I had the town clerk in my office and you were on speakerphone. I did not yell. I stated that you have to follow the APRA. Let me finish, sir. Let me finish, sir.
Yeah.
I did explain that you have to follow the APRA request. There's no special circumstances for people that request information. Everyone has to follow an APRA request.
I did
and so
this morning.
that's right.
So when will you let us know? How much cash is on hand?
We have 10 days. First of all, you didn't give a date. So we will respond. We have 10 days to respond.
Will you respond before the financial town meeting?
Yes, because that's within that time frame.
Right.
Okay, so the request is in good order.
Of course it is.
Okay, I'm just checking, and thank you very much. And again, once again, the memo was out there for over $10 million, and I think that's, you should trust the people of Coventry. They're going to do the right thing, but don't sandbag them. You're going to lose. And thank you for your time.
Mr. Assalone, I believe
Yes,
you
ma'am.
said you had more than one question. Would you like to ask an additional question?
No, I appreciate your time. I've taken enough of it, and I hope everything goes well. And thank you.
We always have time for questions, so if you want to come back and ask another question during this meeting, please feel free to do so.
You're always very kind. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Clement.
Hi, Josh Clements, 10 Gentry Farm Drive. Mr. Assalone, you're a tough act to follow. I don't have any secret leak memos to reveal or anything else to discuss. First, Councilwoman Lima, welcome. Thank you for joining the town council. Obviously, it's a tough gig around here. Appreciate you jumping into the fray. As Mr. Assalone stated, I have full support for raising the property taxes, 29, 35, 39, whatever it is. As Mr. Marchant has gone through the numbers, we've severely underfunded this town. We're underfunding our infrastructure and the other things that are going on that shows in having to pay more money to tear down buildings that are historical in nature. Appreciate the effort to catalog that and preserve some of the history that is here in Coventry. I don't think there's any more belts to tighten. I think this town council, the school committee have been fully transparent throughout this whole budget process. It's all on YouTube if anyone wants to see it, how the budget was developed, how all of the town's different services, what they offer to the residents. So I would debate maybe Mr. Assalone that it hasn't been transparent, but again, I don't have access to all of the leaked memos to know that. The $10 million coming from the COVID relief money, as well intentioned here, is not to bail out the town or fund the pension. So we need to find our own way, and that's raising the property taxes here. I think there's other resolutions long-term within the state. I know we've asked for relief from our state representatives and senators to change the way that property tax bills are allocated and, take advantage of the growth in this town. But there's other bills that are out there. And I would recommend to everyone listening and this town council and school committee to support House Bill 5227 or Senate Bill 0326. This is raising taxes on the top 1% within Rhode Island. I think we need to take this action now within the state that'll go into effect in the next 2 years. That money won't be raised until 2 years from now. So back to Councilwoman Shockley's question, what does the future look like? You know, will we have 3% property tax raises every year for the next 20 years? If we don't take action in the state to secure revenue or funding from the growing income inequality gap between this town and the top 1%, I don't think we'll see it, right? Median household income in Coventry, 65K. Top 1% in this state are all making over $1 million. There are no residents in this town that I'm aware of that are cranking in $1 million. You know, the top 95th percentile in this town is 186K. Mean of the top 5%, 274K. So let's raise taxes on the 1% and use that to fund the state infrastructure that needs to be repaired, whether it's in Coventry or anywhere else within the state. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for your comments. You're always a very good participant and we appreciate your attending all our meetings. Mr. Longley. Mr. Longley, please state your name and your address, please, and your question. Mr. Longley, do you wish to make a comment during public comment? I don't see any other hands raised from the public right now. I just want to give ample time for people to think about what action the council has taken this evening. All right, then we will close public comment. I just want to reiterate to the council, to the members of the public, 299 represents a very lean, responsible budget, which will require, as I mentioned before, post-referendum, very difficult decisions on how to reduce expenditures and to increase revenue. It represents a very modest increase for both town and the school, certainly not what the school has asked us for, but certainly what we believe that is a reasonable increase. A failure on the part of this referendum puts us back 2 years. It's a long period of time. Looking back at the budget that was approved would have been 2 years ago, and we would be operating on 1/12 of a budget month to month. That would create very serious issues for us. Once the appropriation of 2.99 tax levy passes, then all of the council members will be out there asking for your vote and asking for your support so that we can move forward. But we do promise you that we will take up this question as soon as hopefully this referendum passes, and we will take up the question of what is the vision the townspeople have for Coventry, and what action does the council need to take to increase revenues and/or decrease expenditures. Very important questions for us to consider as a whole council and as a whole community. I would now take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Ledwick. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Madam Clerk, please take it.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Hillary Lima,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Ann Dixon.
Yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion to adjourn passes. The meeting is adjourned at 7:32 p.m. And we will all be back here together on May 24th with a very full agenda, beginning at 6 p.m. We're looking forward to seeing all of you with us. Good evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.